We're going to be talking to some experts today. We've got a bunch of winemakers lined up. And first person I'd like to introduce right now is Thomas DeBiase. He is the wine maker, I think, or one of the wine makers at Idlewild Wines. Tom, thank you so much for joining us on the show today, man.
Thanks for having me. I don't make the Idlewild wines. I just sell them. So.
Okay. Well, that's a good thing. So you're here today, and you want to thank you, too, by the way. The VIP thing this morning was a blast. 3 winemakers. Why don't you talk us a little bit through what we all just experienced this morning? That was fun.
Yeah. So I'll take it back to Craig and Alan, who kind of are responsible for this event and putting it on and kind of spreading the good word about rosé. They are big supporters of what we do at Idlewild, and they started coming to a little educational seminar we do monthly, and kind of fell in love with it, and were asking me about ways that we could bring a little bit of that vibe here to the event, and I just told them I'd do it, and
nice.
talk about rosé, category of wine that folks like to use for partying at the pool or on the patio. Talking about it like you would great wines of the world.
You know, I so agree with that. I've been on this sort of mission for a while, and I'm glad to sort of find some brothers and sisters in arms, so to speak, because rosé is a very, it's a serious wine. It's seriously done. And I think you said something important this morning at the sort of session that we were doing about how it's done intentionally. It's not sort of an accidental thing. Oh, we put a little white with a little red and it became a rosé. Talk to us about how you've seen sort of rosé as far as the evolution of the seriousness that the winemakers are putting into it over, say, the past 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, well, certainly. The most important thing to remember is that when you have a beverage like rosé, there's less opportunity to kind of put any window dressing in front of it, right? There's oak barrels and extraction and all these things are often, you can't use them. So it's the perfect vehicle to display, the terroir, right, or the earth, or the culture, or the people that are making it,
or even the varietal.
Oh, and especially the varietal. Yeah, absolutely, all those things. And so what I've found is within this explosion of rosé all day, I've found some really conscientious producers that are making it with deliberately and with intention. And the wines to me are as exciting as some of the great white wines of the world.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because that's really my feeling altogether. As I was mentioning in the intro, at a lot of the wine tastings I do, we typically have a flight of maybe 8 wines, and there's a bunch of whites, and it typically goes, something light to heavy, sort of Pinot Grigio, maybe Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, or something in that realm, and then maybe Pinots through Merlots onto Cabs or Petit Syrahs, and inevitably I'll put something that isn't on the paper, and I'll bring a rosé along, and people tend to, I don't want that. And it's funny, the reaction. So has that been what you've seen and felt over the years, is that sort of initial reaction? Once they get over the hump, they're okay, but that first little moment.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And the funny thing, of course, folks see it and they're like, oh no, I want to get to the more serious wine, right? But as you start to get into peel back the layers of the onion and discover wine for yourself, I drink an enormous amount of Italian wine, and what you'll find are the rosé wines from these coveted Italian producers are the hardest wines to find. Vira has been making Barolo for 120 years, but to find Rosabella, their rosé, like you have to mortgage your house to find it, or give away a child. Cerasuolo wines from Abruzzo, like Emidio Pepe or Valentini, those rosé wines are unicorns. If you're lucky enough to find one, you're spending hundreds of dollars a bottle for them. So it's funny that it's often the wine that people want to skip over, but as you really start to get into the beverage, they're the wines that people want to drink the most and the hardest to find.
It's funny. It's like almost everything is like that, whether it's music or food. But let's just take music for an example. You might find an obscure band with this interesting guitar player that writes these great lyrics, and hardly anybody knows about him. And then there's a sort of a cult following, if you will. And then suddenly, once that person is discovered, everybody's sort of into it all of a sudden. And rosé is a little bit like that in a way. It's sort of being discovered now. I'm actually sitting here right now surprised to hear $100 plus a bottle for rosé from Italy.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Wow.
particularly the producers from Abruzzo. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But the wines are, and Craig and Alan had them. The wines are incredible. I mean, they really are. They're distinctive, and they're as bitter as red wines and gnarly, and yeah, just command your attention and need a big plate of salami because they're burly.
Well, speaking of salami, we had food pairings with all three. So we had 3 wines from 3 winemakers who are all going to be joining us here later on in the show. Jeff Runquist from Runquist Cellars up in Amador County. We had Rick Motion from Motion Vineyards here in Russian River Valley, and Rick from CalStar. And each one made a rosé with a different varietal, with a different sort of whole intention in the background. Tell us a little bit about, for the person that's maybe sort of starting to pique their curiosity, what should someone that wants to start trying a rosé or dig into it a little bit, what are the parameters that they should start with?
Well, as they're looking for, what I always tell folks is, with wine in general, is to don't worry about necessarily drinking appellation or varietal or particularly vintage.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get caught up in that. To always drink producer. So if you have a producer that you love and they make rosé, you're probably going to like their rosé, right?
That's a great idea.
Always drink producer. And that's when folks are exploring new winemaking regions, whether it's something really dense like Germany or something really expensive and you don't have a lot of opportunity to or funds to experiment, like Burgundy, right? Like Burgundies can be several $100s a bottle. So, find producers that you or your friends love through, collaborative tastings, and then always drink producer. To me, that's the safest bet, and you're gonna get the most bang for your buck. You're gonna be rewarded every time.
I love it. Well, so I've been to Sonoma a number of times. We've had a lot of Sonoma people on the show, a lot of Sonoma wineries. Love this region. I know Jeff is from the Sierra Foothills, which is an awesome up-and-coming, kind of not an unknown region, but an I think, valued region for what they produce there. But this is just such a great area. Are rosés starting to happen at a lot more wineries, as you've seen around the Sonoma and the Napa area?
I think we've seen both sides of the coin. So we've seen rosés that have just kind of popped up as an economic opportunity, and they're a little bit of an afterthought.
Right.
But then we've also seen conscientious producers that are looking that are going to, they want it. The intention is, like I said, to drink producer. The intention is to make great wine every time with every wine, and those are the wines that I think that you really should focus on drinking.
Well, I love the philosophy. Now tell us, earlier when you did your session this morning with the winemakers, you said something, and I think we all agreed, especially the panel for sure, and I think now that as the audience we all understood and agreed this. Talk to us about the concept of, what did you call it? Rosé with no cliché, or?
Rosé without cliché. So that's actually an interesting concept. So I didn't think of the term Asimov from the New York Times. He when he was writing about one of the Idlewild wines, our rosé that we produce and sell, he called it an American rosé without cliché. And I loved hearing about the products that I work with being described that way, but also it kind of really stuck with me, and I thought that's the conversation that we should be having. So Craig, at these Sunday wine education classes that we've been teaching, he came up to me afterwards and he said, how do we continue the conversation? And I told him, I said, we just need to speak about the wine without cliche, rosé without cliche, and real wines from real people, that are agriculturally produced.
Right. No, I love it. It's time to take it seriously, and we always think of it as a summer wine. One of the things that Craig wanted to mention to me too, he was on the show last week. It's an all-around wine. It can be had at different times of the holidays. It pairs with so many different things. It loves fresh vegetables and unusual things. And we're about to have one of the chefs here that does the charcuterie, that produced the charcuterie for the tasting this morning, and that was really terrific. Hey Tom, I want to thank you so much for being on. Thomas DeBiase of Idlewild Wines. Tell people how to find you or find Idlewild Wines.
Just come visit us at 132 Plaza Street in Healdsburg. We're open 7 days a week, almost 365 days a year. I'll be there, and I look forward to meeting you all.
Very good. Well, listen, we're going to be right back after a couple. Very good. Well, listen, we're going to be right back